Right, well, very kindly, Tim Fielding, who's the City Manager for Health and Wellbeing and Deputy Director of Public Health, is going to be our first speaker. So everyone would like to welcome him, please.
Yeah, fantastic. Hi, thanks so much, Hilary, to everyone else, and absolute delight to be here, I have to say, and was just thinking what, in terms of thinking how much things seem to have moved on since I was talking at the launch of this a while ago, and it does just feel as though the momentum and the amount of work that's happening has just been absolutely immense, and a huge amount of acknowledgement to everybody that's been far more involved than I have. And my interest certainly spans really broadly across this whole agenda, and just very directly from the bits that I'm involved in. Obviously, some of the public health staff that have worked very, very closely, as Hilary's already acknowledged, but also from a very personal point of view, the environmental health colleagues and public protection colleagues who have another whole angle and focus, but equally important around the whole food agenda as well. I mean, I do think Hull is a really unique and fantastic place, and from my experience, there's never been a better time building on all the positivity and the momentum that Hull's had over recent years to try and launch something like this, and to really raise that aspiration and that vision about food right across the system. However, from a health point of view, there are clearly huge challenges for the city as well that I think it's important. I don't want to sort of bring the mood down too much in terms of some of the challenges we face on. I'm certainly not going to try and overwhelm you with data and charts, but there are a couple of bits that I think I just want to draw attention to. So this is just an indication here of life expectancy in Hull, and fundamentally it's one of obviously the sort of fundamental things we're interested in. And I don't want you to worry too much about all of it, but there's two particular things here that I think I want to draw your attention to. One is that actually in Hull, as we see for pretty much any health indicator you see, we are lower than the national averages. The states of health in Hull are still worse than they are elsewhere, and that's an issue for us that we need to have an aspiration about improving. And you can see that there for the red line, we are lower for females than for Hull, than nationally, and for the blue lines for males. The other point that I want to make on this is actually there's a really concerning trend in Hull that we've seen, and it's not just unique to Hull, but it's certainly not one that's reflected across the country. And if you notice where you have the national lines in terms of the dotted lines at the top on both of these, you're still seeing a continuing upward trend in life expectancy. What's concerning here in Hull is that actually over the last 4 to 8 years we've started to see not only a tailing off but actually a decline in life expectancy. This is obviously a hugely complex issue. I'm not suggesting food is the only thing implicated in that, but there is something fundamental about the health of the city and the population that we really need to take seriously and to think about raising aspirations. The other point, however, is it isn't just about length of life, it's about quality of life. And one of the things that we know that's absolutely critical is about people in Hull spend proportionally a greater amount of their time in a state of poor health compared to other areas as well. So more importantly, in a sense, than the life expectancy, is this is about healthy life expectancy. I promise you this is the last graph. And what you have here is at the top the national rate of healthy life expectancy, and at the bottom the local Hull rate. And what you see again here is that issue about actually healthy life expectancy is lower in Hull than it is nationally, but by a far greater margin than life expectancy. We're talking maybe 3 years overall in life expectancy. We're talking about maybe 7 or 8 years in healthy life expectancy. So we're talking about healthy life expectancies of about 56, 57 in Hull. If you think of what that means in context to people, never mind working ages, that's an issue that we need to raise the aspiration and to address. This isn't an NHS issue, however. Because we're talking about health, I don't want people to think this is about the NHS, this is about cuts, this is about GPs. The really important thing about health is, as important as the NHS is, actually it accounts for a really, really small proportion of whether or not we're healthy and whether or not we're well. People have put estimates on it academically of between maybe 10 and 20%. There is all the rest of the influences which actually impact on all of these really serious indicators about how well and how healthy we are, and it's what we class over and above any genetics is the wider determinants of health. So it's all a hugely complex range of factors that actually interplay in terms of where we're born, where we grow up, where we live, where we play and where we work. And it's those factors that are absolutely inseparable right across in terms of food and the way it plays. And I think one of the fantastic things, therefore, for me for the Food Charter is it touches and works across so much of that wider system that actually impacts on who people are in Hull and how well they are. The second, I think, really, really important thing to say here, and it was absolutely touched on by the Bishop right at the beginning, is this doesn't affect everybody equally. This is fundamentally about inequalities. It's about some people being worse off than others, and it's about a case of social justice, really, at the end of the day. We've seen with the indications between Hull and elsewhere, and we see in pretty much every health indicator, if you're worse off financially and economically, you're worse off in terms of health, and your outcomes are worse. And that absolutely resonates through every sort of aspect around food as well that we can think of. So the emphasis in the Food Charter on addressing those inequalities is absolutely critical, particularly to a city like Hull. I mean, I'm just going to rattle through some of these. When we think very much about food, you know, there are some very particular things, and obviously it does particularly impact on weight, although that's not one of the only areas. But we know, for example, that a quarter of our children go into primary school already either overweight or obese, and by the time they leave primary school, it's 1 in 3 children. We know that when they get into adulthood, we're talking about 2/3, well more than 2/3 in Hull, of the adult population, again, is overweight and obese. These are significant problems for us. They pose significant problems in many of those individuals in terms of the health implications that causes for them, and impacts on those earlier slides about healthy life expectancy. But it actually it is a problem for us as a system as well in terms of a whole range of costs. We know as well from talking to people in terms of what people report themselves about their own diet, that actually there is a huge opportunity to improve in terms of the access that people have to healthy food and food, and some of the indications about the numbers of people that do, the numbers of people that eat fresh food and vegetable, and as I say, about the fact that disproportionately affects some areas of the population than others. These last 2 slides I don't really intend to talk to because quite honestly I think the quotes that are there from Sustainable Food Cities probably say it far more succinctly and far more articulately than I could. So I'm just going to literally stop and just let you just to read that one for a second. And similarly with the next one. And just lastly, you know, to say we can't say enough, I think, from a public health point of view, how much we do support this entire vision and this entire aspiration, and really sort of so pleased to see you all here. Hugely important as well, balancing that input that we have in the partnership both with the voluntary sector, with the business sector, with the regulatory colleagues, and critically with the regeneration colleagues in the council. And I'll be handing over any second to Malcolm in terms of balancing that perspective as well. Just to say, in terms of a council point of view, our commitment now is that we'll take this back and take this through all the council processes now in terms of seeking that sign-up from the council. I know there's been some people who wanted me just to stay up today and stand up and say we sign up as a council to this. I've held back partly because it's not possible in a democratic organisation like the council for me to speak on behalf of the council and do that. But actually part of the real value of going back and going through the process of doing that right across through the different areas with the different directors and taking it through the actual cabinet process is that it will raise the awareness as well and the meaningfulness of what this actually means for us to tangibly do something, not just make a tokenistic signature as an organisation. So that will certainly be the commitment that we take back now. We've already discussed that about how we'll take that back in terms of doing that. So at this point I'll hand over to Malcolm to and I'll let you introduce yourself.